consumers. Now, Dan, let's get into the key consumer trends in 2025, okay? Let's start with the big picture. What are the standout trends among Canadian home buyers and mortgage consumers so far this year in 2025? I know the report is loaded with data, but you're a guy that enjoys some data. What jumped out at you first?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to unpack in the report, and there's like so many like clickbait, like zinger data points that I could use that it was hard to just pick one. But one major highlight is that more first-time homebuyers are kind of re-entering the market. In fact, first-timers made up 12% of all mortgage transactions in the last 18 months, covered by the survey, which is up from 10% in 2024. Wow. Now, that might not sound like a huge jump, but it is a significant rise, right? That would be like a 20% increase in their position.
For sure, yeah. Especially in kind of a down market, it is surprising.
Yeah, and we've been hearing a lot of these anecdotes from realtors, and you always have to take it with a grain of salt, stuff you hear from realtors about when it's optimistic, especially because, like they are known for being maybe a little bit optimistic. But it means that despite high home prices and higher interest rates lately, more new buyers manage to get into homeownership.
Yeah, I mean, it is, as I said, surprising kind of given the affordability challenges that have been an ongoing theme for years, right? It suggests that there's still that pent-up demand, right? I mean, some of these people, the first-timers, may have been planning to buy their first home years ago, but really only found a way into the market now. But the point is they're finding ways to make it work. The survey also confirms something that we've suspected, Dan, that first-time home buyers are having to get creative and be persistent. On average, those who were renting beforehand rented for about 6.5 years before buying their first home. So they're not, they're waiting longer and saving up more. And a lot of them aren't doing it alone.
Yeah, this was the really interesting part. Definitely caught my eye here. Over half of first-time buyers, 54% of them, shared the purchase of their home with someone other than their spouse. And, the way they word that makes it sound like maybe there's an extra person in the relationship. That's probably not the case.
Thruples are big these days.
Yeah. If you think, I mean, I know thruples, there's a lot of reality TV shows with that stuff going on right now, but it's not what's happening. It's not a new Canadian reality TV show.
It's not an investment strategy or thesis here.
But we're talking about co-ownership or joint venture with a friend, sibling, or in most cases, good old bank of mom and dad, or in this case, not just the bank of mom and dad, but the cosign of mom and dad, which means that, a lot of these like first time buyers, if their properties go down in value, or if they miss their mortgage payments or whatever, there's financial exposure beyond just them. That signals a rise in co-buying or maybe even house hacking among young buyers, but it also allows them to kind of break that income ceiling that they are probably seeing on their mortgage application, where it allows them to maybe buy more expensive houses. So if you can't afford the whole house on your own, you bring in a partner, not necessarily a romantic partner, could be family or even an equity partner. I know there's a lot of third-party equity partners that are doing this, like Cedar, who came to our AI Meets Real Estate event that Valerie put on, Key and Arboro. There's a couple of different options in the market for people who want to buy with like reduced down payment, but you get a partner like that or the mom and dad to split the costs.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's a smart strategy, right? It's new age house hacking. We've seen it and heard about it for years anecdotally, Dan, and now the data is backing it up. And speaking of helping family out, the bank of mom and dad, as you mentioned, is once again playing a huge role for first time purchasers. This was a big theme back in the peak of the pandemic, and it kind of hasn't gone away since then. The survey found that financial gifts or inheritances were a major source of down payment for 41%. So we're approaching a half of first-time buyers. And we're not talking, hey, here's, 10 grand, 5 grand. The average gift, Dan, $74,000. And in expensive markets like good old Ontario and BC, the average gift was even higher, up to $150,000 in some cases. Mom, Dad, I know you listen to the podcast.
Just write the check already.
Pony up. Come on.
Just write the check.
What's going on here, guys? Enough is enough.
150K gifts in Ontario and BC is wild. That's like a whole condo in other markets.
Yeah, they go
Canada.
Buy that in cash in Saskatchewan somewhere.
Or at least like the big chunk of a down payment in most markets in Canada. It really underlines how intergenerational wealth is helping to prop up the first-time homebuyer segment in those pricey markets. And this is like one of those things where home ownership really, or real estate ownership really becomes that like intergenerational wealth thing, right? Where it's exacerbating the divide between the rich and the poor. We're seeing it play out right now. Like StatCan put out a report a couple of years ago that statistically the most the more real estate that someone's parents own, the more likely they are to own real estate, right?
Yeah,
and the greatest predictor of whether or not you'll be a homeowner is that your parents are homeowners. So even with those huge gifts, 1 in 5 buyers truly needed that help. The survey notes that 20% of home buyers would not have been able to purchase without the gift. The other 80% said they could have still bought without it, but presumably with some sacrifices, like maybe a smaller home, lower price point, or longer savings period.
Okay, so let's do just a quick kind of recap of some of these stats, because it's kind of crazy. So the average time to save, it took first-time home buyers about just 3.5 to 4 years to save for that down payment on average. That is not that bad. The encouraging part is this is actually faster than before. Last year's survey indicated it was over 4 years. Another survey said it was down around the 3.5. So people are finding ways to accelerate that, possibly due to, you know, more forced savings, or maybe some people getting better jobs. Top sources of that down payment money, that crucial money that you need to buy any real estate. Well, according to the survey, first-time home buyers were a mixed. About 39% used savings outside of their RSP, so personal savings. That's that, you know, money in maybe a Wealthsimple account, or maybe in a BMO ETF, or maybe it's in your mattress. I don't know. The other came from gifts or inheritance, as I just mentioned, over 40% there. And then, of course, the good old FHSA, that's the first home savings account, 38% used money from this account. This is interesting because the FHSA was a new tool launched in, I remember covering this in the podcast with you a few years ago, back in 2023. That was helped to launch first-time home buyers save up tax-free money, and apparently it's catching on. But 80% of first-time home buyers were aware of the product, the FHSA, and about 71% of them actually opened one or used it. So that's good to see, you know, small step in the right direction.
I think the FHSA thing is really important, actually. Like, you know, we're in the middle of the year, but towards the end of last year, I remember having the conversation with some, like a lot of people who were asking about it. I was like, even if you're not going to use it, open it right now, because you only get the contribution room. Like the contribution room unlocks each new year that you own it. So you gotta, or like that you have the account. So go start an account so that you get that annual contribution room. Anyway, it is great to have these numbers and to see these numbers, and between personal scrimping, family help, and new programs like that FHSA, first time buyers are scraping together apparently enough down payments to increase their activity in the market. But even with that, affordability is still stretched. The survey data shows that many buyers are maxing out their budgets to buy a home. About half of home buyers overall paid the maximum price they could afford in 2025, a jump from only 46% in the last 2 years, but not nearly as high as we were seeing during 2021 and 2022. So more and more people are stretching. Obviously, this is more pronounced in the expensive regions. 66% of home buyers in BC and 64% in Ontario paid the max they could afford. No surprise here. Obviously, those markets really push you to the limit. If we focus on first-timers, a solid 65% of first-time buyers said they paid the maximum they could afford. Repeat buyers were a bit more conservative, probably because they already have equity, so they don't really need to stretch, with about 40% of repeat buyers, which still feels like a big number from my perspective, but buying to the max.
I mean, look, man, all of those numbers come across a little scary to me. You know, 2/3 of buyers in BC and Ontario stretching to their limit. It tells me buyers are optimistic or desperate enough to push their finances to the edge just in order to get into a home, and in some cases to get into an investment property. You know, despite most challenges, most Canadians still feel like real estate is worth it. I know you and I do as well, Dan, but I'm not of the mindset of pushing yourself to the absolute limit. Roughly 80% of mortgage consumers believe home ownership is a good long-term investment. I'd agree. And 74% believe that the value of their home will increase in the next 12 months. I would agree with that as well. And even if it doesn't in the next 12 months, who cares, right? If is it going to go up in the next 3, 5, 10 years? That's what you should be considering. Again, depending on what kind of strategy you're pushing.